It is extremely shameful that side of government actually believes that the majority is correct and actually believes that just because everybody does it, it's correct, and just because nobody does it, it's wrong. It is a shame that they believe so. A few rebuttals before I go on to my argumentations, right? Two things. Number one is that it is highly insulting that you do not have the trust in your judiciary body, because the judiciary is a body of integrity that has been around and should has been around for millennium, and it should continue to do so because it is a highly reliable body, which people of highly qualified status, which people who are highly educated and highly trained actually go into that field. Therefore, it is very much in our favor if you actually trust these people in comparison to the average man who doesn't know as much. Secondly, is that it is naive to assume that all decisions made are for the benefit of everyone. I understand that you are sort of have a sort of trade-off, but it is high. But the entirety of your speech highly revolves around the best case scenario, which everyone does good things, everyone believes in the good things, and everyone actually cares about everyone and does not have a certain bias towards their own race or group. Done with rebuttals. Argumentation. Right? First argumentation, referendums only benefit the majority, and this actually is an extension of the rebuttal I said earlier. The premises here are three. Number one, a society is not a single coherent unit. Instead, society is divided into multiple factions or groups. Notice, our society consists of higher class people, of middle class people, of lower class people, and usually the middle class people actually dominate. And we're not trying to talk about higher class people, but rather lower class people, because lower class people, even though they are in the most desperate sort of need, they do not have much of a voice because they are not powerful in terms of influence and in terms of number. And also, society is divided into like groups and into groups or races. For example, in a certain country, you have the majority race for let's say you have white people, and then you have your Latinos, your African Americans, all of these people who are a lower class in terms, not necessarily lower class, but a lower grade in terms of in terms of influence in society. Secondly, is that as in daily life, disenfranchised groups will continue to be discarded in a referendum. The same way how your voice is not heard on a day-to-day basis because just because you are of a different race, just because you are a migrant, for example, just because you are someone who is not a part of the majority part of society, does not necessarily mean that when you're part of a referendum, suddenly your voice will be heard, suddenly you are in for a substantial amount of change. No. The same way how you are discarded in society, you will also be discarded in referendums. Therefore, we don't see any progress in that. But third, however, is that courts are a neutral tool whose only task is to provide just laws. Notice that justice is blind and justice applies to everyone. That is why we have things like rule of law. Albert Van Dyke did not create the rules of law for nothing. All of these things are highly contingent upon the idea that law is applied equally and it is applied to everyone who declares himself as a part of this federation or as a part of the federation or your nation. The impact here is that there is no substantial change happening for those. So no substantial change happens for those who actually need referendums, meaning that people who are in the minority will not get what they want forever and ever because they will never be heard. Their voices, even if they all unanimously agree, if they're not a part of the majority, and the majority does not care about their civil rights, it will never be done, and it will never be done. But secondly, however, is that courts do provide change, albeit slow, and that is a price we are willing to pay. The trade-off coming from the opposition is that you can see that courts are significantly slower than referendums. However, it is substantially more effective, and it is progressive and sustainable, and you have steady progress that involves the entirety of society. Second argumentation is that courts are unaffected by sentiment. They'll only deliver the objective justice. Now, the premises are two. The first being that society is constantly changing their moral compass. Notice how in the event of Brexit, the referendum that happened where people actually supported Brexit, it wasn't actually a thing that would happen out of intellect, that happened out of a pure intellectual discourse, but a major chunk of the reason why the decision was as it is because of sentiment, was because of what people felt, was because of emotion, and emotions come and go, emotions build up and they dissipate. All these things are unsustainable, because when we talk about laws, when we talk about rights, you want rights that are sustainable, that can be applied throughout years and decades, and without having to constantly change that. And secondly, however, is that courts follow a uniform set of principles. They aim to protect and carry out justice in an equal and efficient way. Like I said earlier, court of justice is blind. Therefore, courts follow a uniform set of principles. Principles that look like everyone should be treated equally. Principles like everyone has the fundamental rights to life, to education, to healthcare, to movement, to residence, to property. All these fundamental rights that are encrypted upon the constitution of a certain country. All of these things that are not necessary, that are not present in referendums, because people do what they feel is right, and not following any certain principles that guide their decisions, that guide their thinking. Now, the impact here is that number one, you have no regrets, in the sense that you do not regret your decisions after your emotions have dissipated and vanished. And secondly, you have sustainable decisions and you have sustainable decisions and steady progress in terms of fighting for civil rights, and stable meaning that it continuously progresses even though it is significantly slower. On your side, we don't care about that, but it's a price we're willing to pay. So to weigh down most of these arguments. The first being that we will deliver an argument explaining the horrible consequences. We simply assume that the majority are automatically correct. Whilst we do believe in the idea of democracy, we don't believe that people are inherently good. We don't believe that people are inherently just. We do believe that there are good people in the world, and there are inherently good and inherently bad principles. We would rather follow these principles rather than people who are constantly fluctuating in terms of their morality. Secondly, is that we've shown you how courts are the best tool to mobilize justice, simply because they are neutral and they do not care who comes forward towards them, because they will just judge them based on law. And thirdly, because the government has only dealt with it. And thirdly, we provide the comparison, which government has already dealt with utopian scenarios, where they provide you a security of civil rights, in which people decades into the future can actually confirm that they will get civil rights, even though it happens slowly, but it happens surely. Thank you.